on AFA today. Don't forget to tune into our normal show, The Steve Deace Show, which airs on many of these fine stations, as well as other stations around the country tonight from 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern. You can email us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, @Steve Deace Show. We're chatting with Matt Bevin, who is challenging Ditch McConnell, the alleged Senate Republican leader, in a very widely viewed, hotly contested primary, one of several credible primary challengers for entrenched incumbent Republican senators already lined up for next year. Another, Milton Wolfe, who's a relative of Obama's. I've interviewed him. He's brilliant, hilarious. He's challenging now Pat Roberts in Kansas. Lindsey Graham facing 3 challengers in South Carolina. Lamar Alexander facing challenges in Tennessee. And there is, I think, if you look at this trend line we were talking about earlier this hour, there's a trend line here of a potential major upheaval in this country for next year. People are upset, and I think it's because of the word we just heard Matt Bevin use, leadership, or the lack thereof. And Matt, as I talked about a little while ago, when you see in one decade the American people vote for all Republican government, then split government, then all Democrat government, then split government, and they do that in one decade, that is a clear indication that they're not getting the kind of leadership they're looking for. What kind of leadership do you think they're looking for?
I think people are looking for men and women of actual principle, men and women who have core conviction that they may or may not, the constituents may or may not even fully agree with. But they want to know that if a person wakes up at 2 in the morning, they're going to say the same thing that they say at 2 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And they want to know that these men and women are willing to represent what they, the people, want them to represent when they go to Washington. And they're tired on both sides of the aisle with individuals who, from the moment they get there, seem to be primarily interested in getting reelected and getting back.
Let's talk about you for a few minutes, Matt. Who is Matt Bevin?
I'm a businessman. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I grew up in the country in a little town of 250 people, raising all the food we ate on our own land and animals for meat and milk and eggs, and just a very simple life. I was the second of 6 children. The 4 boys, we had a 3-bedroom house. The 4 boys shared a bedroom my whole life growing up, so it was learned kind of how to share and get along in Spartan conditions. But it was a great upbringing, raised in a very strong Christian home where Christian values became the bedrock of my worldview as I grew up and have continued to be so as an adult. I put myself through college after Washington and Lee University, which is where I went to school. I joined the military. I was an Army officer for a number of years on active duty, but then for the last 20 years and change have been out in the private sector where I'm simply a guy who pays taxes and I pay attention. And I have been looking for a long time at this exact trend you're discussing. And I have realized that if we, the people, don't send representation from ourselves to Washington and then hold them accountable, truly hold them accountable, then we are going to keep going down this path. When recently Rasmussen has looked, less than 20%, I think it's 17% now of Americans believe that we're on the right track. I mean, it is regardless of ideology, Americans do not feel good about the representation that we have. And it's time for us to make a change. And I think it's necessary for men and women who understand how the wealth of the nation is created and how the bulk of Americans live to be the representation in Washington, D.C.
So you've almost kind of lived an American Gothic biography here, of rural America, small town America, salt of the earth America. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're a veteran. You've served in the military. You've then went into the private sector. You were successful from a business perspective. Your family has an interesting story too, I understand.
I have a fairly large family, and folks have sometimes find kind of that to be rather interesting. I've got 9 children. My wife and I had 5 children, and then we're led for a number of reasons to consider adoption. We adopted one little guy that made 6 children, and then in the course of that, we learned about a family of 3 children who had no home and no parents, and we thought, here is a chance where we can adopt this family of 3, where the oldest is already 10. The chances are they won't find a home, and so we said, hey, 6, 9, what's the difference? So we adopted 3 more, and now we have 9 children, ages 3 to 14. So I have a lot of really good reasons not to throw my hat into this ring, but conversely, I have some tremendously good reasons to throw my hat in the ring. And I look at their future in the description you just gave. I have been so blessed to have truly lived the American dream. And I look at the future and I say, what is the chance that the next generations are going to have that same opportunity? And I see that chance waning. And I think if it's possible to do something about it, then folks like me need to step up and do what we can to make that happen.
I get the courage of conviction, but it's not an easy call, I would imagine, living a family life where you still have young kids, a successful business, and throwing your hat into the ring, challenging such an entrenched incumbent, because I've heard all kinds of mean, nasty things about you. That's why I wanted to let our audience have a chance to know a little bit more about your biography. You've barely been a candidate here for a couple of months, and you're taking a lot of slings and arrows from the ruling class. And frankly, what a lot of what guys like you have already gone through early on in a campaign is why a lot of guys like you don't run for offices like this, Matt.
It is, but it's one of the very problems with politics. And again, I'll give credit to my parents, and you know, I was raised with thick skin. And people making up lies about me and trying to slander me or scare me or what have you isn't going to dissuade me from doing the right thing. I know what my moral compass is. I know what my true compass is. I understand what is important, and I'm not going to be dissuaded by those that would scare folks like me off. But the nonsense you're referring to is unfortunate because it does prevent good men and women from stepping up. Winston Churchill once said that history turns on these sort of seminal little moments that through the lens of history you realize they were significant, but at the time you didn't really know. He said, but shame on the man who finds himself at such a place, who is either unprepared or unwilling to take up the challenge. And I have been arguably prepared, and it then becomes a function of, am I willing? Our founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They had better things to do. They had much to lose. That wasn't a campaign slogan. These were people who gave all or some of those things. And they did it because they were called upon in that moment to do for the public good something that came at expense to themselves. I feel that I'm in the same boat, and I think it's incumbent upon me to do just as they did and to stand forward as a public servant at this time.
Then why challenge McConnell? He's a Republican, right? Isn't he one of the automatic good guys then, Matt?
Yeah, wow. I think, as you know full well, I said to someone, would you rather be if you're a sheep, would you rather be in a sheep pen knowing there's a wolf in there with a wolf that you can recognize as a wolf that you can keep an eye on? Or would you rather be in there with a wolf that's dressed up as a sheep and keeps sneaking up on you? And I would rather be in the wolf pen or in the sheep pen with the wolf that I can recognize. In Mitch McConnell, we have someone who pretends to be a conservative, but is quick to throw the Second Amendment, quick to throw pro-life issues, quick to throw the Fourth Amendment, quick to throw any number of things under the bus when it is politically expedient for him to do so. And he is an absolute non-leader when it comes to things like amnesty and Syria and now Obamacare. When we need him to stand up and lead, he is missing in action, and we deserve better. We deserve better. We just do.
Was that on display a couple of weeks ago when you've got Cruz for 21 hours rallying I think it increased C-SPAN's audience, quintupled it, and the country is just really entranced by his willingness to stand up there for 21 hours, stand up to the system. You saw him depant Harry Reid, which is about 7 years overdue. And again, why is a freshman senator doing these things, Matt Bevin? Don't we have leadership? If Mike Lee and Ted Cruz can cause all the right people to lose their cotton-picking minds when they've been in office for all of 10 months, then what in the world have a lot of these other Republicans we've sent up there been doing all this time?
It's interesting. There are many of the purported leaders who are leaders in name only, and what you're saying is spot on, and that is that this argument that we need to keep sending these people back for decade after decade because we need their leadership is an old paradigm at best and a farce more likely, because it is the young guys. It is all those folks that have been there just 1, 2, 3, 4 years that are the true leaders in the U.S. Senate today. And it is exactly why we, the people, have got to start looking for candidates, some of whom you just alluded to a moment ago, in each of these states, in Kansas and South Carolina, and I hope folks would consider me here, in Kentucky, Tennessee, in other words, where we can send some of these old dinosaurs home. Let them go back, I say, to the private sector and enjoy all the benefits of largesse that they have foisted upon us in the form of overtaxation and overregulation. Let them become citizens and appreciate all the wonderful things they've been doing for us.
Some of the folks that are working with candidates like you, I am acquainted with, friends with, and one of the arguments they make that I think is a powerful argument is fine. If the system wants us to be pragmatic, if you want to say Scott Brown's the best kind of thing we can get out of Massachusetts, I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm not going to argue that because it is the People's Republic of Massachusetts. But in a state where the Republican nominee for president is losing the election, but he wins the state by 23 points, there ought to be a movement conservative representing that state in every congressional district and in both of their Senate seats. In every red state and in every red district in the country, there ought to be a movement conservative, not a measly-mouthed, lukewarm establishment hack. There ought to be a movement conservative representing those people because that's who those people are. And that's one of the the messages of the people that are working with your campaign. And I think that's a very powerful message.
We the people, I mean, here's what it boils down to, Steve. This is not a game. And those within the establishment on both sides of the aisle put the party above all else. And that is part of what's wrong. This is not a game. We are in a dangerous place financially in this country. And it is necessary that we start to recognize this and turn out at the ballot box. We must turn out. Even a typical primary, a strong turnout is 30-35%. That is unacceptable. We need men and women of conviction, men and women who can see the forest for the trees, to come out and recognize that our nation is in crisis, that financially we cannot continue down this path. And we must come out and support candidates that will listen to the people and that will make fiscally and socially conservative decisions that are in line with the populace.
You mentioned primaries. Last thing I want to ask you about before we run out of time tonight. I think this is the biggest mistake we've made in a generation of political activism. We wait until the system picks our choices, and then we want to complain about the choices afterwards, as if we had no option beforehand to get better choices. And I see David Lane over at the American Renewal Project has done a lengthy study of just evangelical voting habits, for example, and finds about half evangelicals are registered to vote. Half of that half will actually vote. Even fewer of that half will actually vote in primaries. Now, whether it's evangelicals or anybody of conscience or principle, if we don't get people that understand our first freedoms engaged in the process at the primary level, whereas the easiest place to move the ball down the field, then I mean I think to me that's where the real battle is at, Matt Bevin.
I think, Steve, that you're exactly right. We have so much more ability to move the needle in a primary. There are 1.1 million registered Republicans in the state of Kentucky. There will maybe be 30 to 35% that'll vote. You're talking maybe 350,000 will decide this. 175,001 maximum will decide who the next U.S. Senator from Kentucky is. That's a very small number. I need people to please go to mattbevin.com, look at my stance. I won't be the right person for everyone, but I would challenge people to look at where I stand, look at my opponent, Mitch McConnell, and decide who they believe is best capable to carry the Republican torch forward into the future.
Matt, good luck to you. Thanks for talking to us today here on AFA Today. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
All right, take care. That's Matt Bevin. It is not easy. Listen, it's not easy running for office at all. I've had a lot of my friends run for office. Let me tell you, though, what's really hard. Challenging the system in a primary. Because you've got a lot of vested interest here. A lot of times, see, those of you that listen to radio programs like this, God bless you, you believe that political activism is a result of your faith and ethics in action. You believe that this is a clash of worldviews. You're looking at one party's platform compared to the others, and you're like, this is a no-brainer. What's going on here? And then you get those people elected, and most of the time they don't act on those principles in the party platform. And you're like, well, then what was the point? What am I missing here? And then when they run for re-election again, they want to go back to you and tell you they were a champion of all of those issues. You know how many budgets Mitch McConnell's voted for that funded Planned Parenthood? Tons. He's been in the Senate for 28 years. Now he wants to tell you he cares about things like school choice. He's been there for 28 years. 28 years. What's he done about school choice the last 27 and a half years? See, you think this is a clash of worldviews. I wish it were. I wish it were. Because then you'd have people of conscience on both sides hammering things out, dealing with one another in integrity. The disagreements would still be vehement, but we could actually still live together. Find enough common ground, we could live together and have a far more stable, prosperous, and civil society. Some of you that are older, you might remember some days like that. But see, the problem is that's not the way the system really works. For guys like Mitch McConnell or Harry Reid, it's really a battle of dueling self-interests. My donor base versus your donor base. Your labor unions versus my crony capitalists. My PAC versus your PAC. My special interest versus your special interests. My bureaucrats versus your bureaucrats. We got a clean house. And the easiest place, maybe the only place to do so before it's too late, is in these primaries. Get involved in these primaries. A fumigation is needed. These primaries can be the vehicle. I want to thank Matt Bevin for joining us, all of you for tuning in today as well. Don't forget to listen to me tonight from 9 p.m. to midnight. You want more information, go to our website, stevedeace.com. That's DEACE, stevedeace.com. God bless. Ephesians 5:11.